Once again, welcome to this webinar on the link between sleep, brain function, and emotional regulation. This is one of my favorite topics to talk about because a lot of times we hear things like, we know we should get better sleep, right? We all know that. We all try. And sometimes it's really understanding like what the functions are without needing to go to medical school or get too nerdy about it, but really understanding what is happening that can help us create different habits around it. And then, especially with sleep, the things that are going on in our brain really help us with how we show up. So, whether that's how we want to show up or how we're aspiring to show up, anything like that really can be linked back to sleep. And I know I'm making sleep sound like the biggest force multiplier in the world. And I would say it probably is one of the biggest. So I also want to acknowledge that we do live in a culture that treats sleep like like it's not mandatory, right? Like it's this inconvenient biological tax. So if people take naps or they even just kind of slow down, maybe they're not even fully sleeping, we tend to view them as idle or lazy or that it's passive. And we also do that to ourselves, where we really start to look at like, oh, I'm not doing enough. Oh, I should be more productive. I've seen a lot of those memes also on social media where they're like, how can I rest more productively? And so it is in the way that our culture is set up that there's always a hustle. We're celebrated when have like more workaholic tendencies and we tend to push more and more and more. And even though we have probably wonderful supervisors who will say, like, make sure you take time for you, take time for rest, the reward systems that are set up are often very much leaning towards how productive can we be? How much can we get done? And so, even though those two things are different, we're hearing one thing and we're seeing another thing, our brain is like, what is the thing that we're being rewarded for? And what we're being rewarded for is pushing ourselves past the limit. And that's where when we can learn more about sleep, we can really be more productive in the ways that we want to be, not just in the hustle kind of way. But then we can also kind of like fix those habits, kind of fix that mentality as well along the way. Neuroscience is like, it's my favorite thing in the world because I feel like it explains everything about everything. That's just my perspective. That is not like from a specifically neuroscience perspective. But with our brains, what's happening when we're sleeping is that there is so much going on. It is highly, highly active. So even though we think sleep, things are slowing down, there are certainly parts of that. And I'll explain this more in a minute, the way that our brain is slowing down is really helping us to intake thoughts and memories and the events of the day and turn them into meaning. Ultimately, our brains are meaning making machines. And we as humans are meaning making machines. That's how we operate in the world. That's why certain things are valuable to us. And at night is when we take all of our experiences from the day, all the things that happened, whether they're positive, negative, indifferent, we take all those things and our brain has the opportunity to remove the emotional charge from them, remove the stress hormones that can come along with them, and say, okay, what does this actually mean to me? And so it's a really critical piece. Again, I know here it says like sleep is not shutting down. A lot of times we can say like, okay, I need to kind of power my brain down. And it's almost like we're powering our brain down in the way that like we need to reset our computer so it has all the latest updates from all the latest things that are happening. While we're sleeping, our brain is doing three really critical things. And we'll go mostly into pillars 1 and 2, and I'll talk about pillar 3. But first, there's this cognitive integration. And I already kind of mentioned that, where there's this element of what are all the things that happen today and what am I going to do with those things? So are they going to go to memory? Are they going to become habits? Like what is that going to look like? And your brain's going to work on figuring that out. Then there's also this psychological regulation. And this is really critical because this will impact how we show up. This is our resilience. It is our emotional, not only balance, but regulation and emotional intelligence. it helps enable the part of our brain that does executive functioning. And that's the part that says, okay, I can now take this situation that's happening. Maybe there's chaos or emotional charge around it, but I can say, I can remain in a balanced place while still being connected. But if I'm not getting sleep, that's not going to happen. And I'm sure we've all had those examples. I know me, even literally this week, I was not getting great sleep. Crazy that I've talked about this now, but it happens to all of us, right? Like it's very natural to sometimes not get good sleep. And I was working in my garden and I was just putting soil in the raised garden beds. And I was going so quickly that I was just going way too quickly for something that was supposed to be a relaxing activity. And I spilled some of the soil from the bag outside of the garden bed onto the ground, which is also soil and grass and all of that. And I just was like, I just kind of had this emotional response to it, like, well, I'm not going to do this anyway, right? Which is completely unbalanced. And so if I'd gotten more sleep, and then I made sure to go to bed early that night. But it's like, those are the things that start to happen, those little things that we will have an overly emotional reaction to something that in my situation, it was literally nothing. It was soil going into one area of soil versus another. So that's just one example. And it's a silly example, but those are the things that'll stack up. So in sleep, our brain is also helping to be like, okay, hey, like let's release all these stress hormones. Let's not go at things emotionally charged. And it helps to bring you back to balance. And then, of course, there's the biological maintenance that happens when we're sleeping. And I'll go into a little bit more of that in a minute. But it's really this metabolic washing of the brain and of the space between our brain cells that helps with neurodegenerative diseases, helps prevent them further down the path. Okay, so when we're talking about sleep, how are we getting to this place? When we are thinking about the cognitive part of sleep, there are two things. And I promise there's not going to be a quiz at the end of this, so you don't have to memorize anything. But we have this slow wave sleep. And this is where our brain starts to say, like, it's kind of like a mass effect where they're like, okay, like our neurons are going to fire in these large synchronized patterns because it's almost like, let's look at everything that happened in the day and let's pull it in so we can see which parts we want to dissect, which parts are emotionally charged, which parts are embarrassing or triggering in some way. But that's that part of sleep that's like, hey, like, let's see kind of what's going on. The recon part to say, hey, what kind of a transformation does this brain need overnight? And that's that slow wave sleep. A lot of things that happen during the day, of course, we replay. And that part of our brain is called the default mode network. And what the default mode network does is it will grab onto something that is specifically emotional or embarrassing. And the reason why is because your brain is designed to keep you safe. That's what it cares about. Now, does our brain know the difference between being under threat by a tiger versus getting feedback we don't like? No, the brain's not worried about that. It's worried about your safety. And if something is uncomfortable, embarrassing, emotionally charged, that default mode network is going to hold on to it so that later, specifically when we're sleeping, it can start to pull it apart to say, how dangerous is this? How much should I avoid this? So that's one of the memories. It also, of course, replays really positive memories. So I know, like, we go to sleep and it's like we had this really incredible day. Our brain is also replaying those and it's creating these neural patterns. So in neuroscience, we like to say what fires together wires together. So when we have certain things that are emotional, whether it's positive or negative emotions, whatever those are, when that is associated with a certain event, our brain will then start to create an integrated neural pathway for it. And that's saying, hey, this thing was important, whether it's important for safety, whether it's important for kind of love and social, like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, whatever it is important for, we want to remember this. And so when we're sleeping, the brain says that, like, the default mode network passes it in through the brain and the brain says, yes, let me grab onto this and we're going to make this more of a memory, right? We're going to continue to replay this. And the more our memory replays it, the stronger that neural pathway gets. And then, like I said at the start, we're meaning-making machines. So this is also where the consolidation happens, and it kind of moves into that, how does it help our emotions regulate? When we're sleeping, it can say like, okay, hey, we're going to transfer this. We need to figure out what to do with it. Are we going to let it go? Is it for safety? What is it for? Now we're going to do something with it. So that's when we move into this kind of like deep sleep, which is the first phase of sleep. Pardon me. The part of our brain that is mostly navigating throughout the day, it's our prefrontal cortex. And that is the executive functioning part of our brain. And that's the part that says, okay, I know how to react to this. I know what to do with this email. I know how to be emotionally intelligent. I know how to do my job, right? It's like this competence. It's like all those things that help us really engage in the world, right? And the prefrontal cortex is the part of our brain that all of those memories, all of the things that we've done up till now have consolidated. And the prefrontal cortex is really gets to be the recipient, if you will, of all of that work, all of that meaning making. And so when something happens, let's say we were getting feedback we don't like, if we have not had enough sleep, or if we have not had enough kind of reps with something, like I said, if we don't have those integrated neural pathways, we are going to respond in a much different way, I'll say. So I'll use the feedback example. We're starting to get feedback. We start to feel uncomfortable in our body. All 5 of our senses are always taking in information. We see that our boss looks nervous. So they're nervous. Should I be nervous? And even though we're not literally thinking every single one of those thoughts, all of our senses are consistently taking in information. And once it gets enough information that it says, uh-oh, this might be something you're not going to like, this is going to be something uncomfortable or potentially unsafe, what happens is an amygdala hijack. And when the amygdala is hijacked, it's our lizard brain, it dumps a ton of cortisol, the stress hormone, into your bloodstream. And it does that because that is fight or flight. Fight, flight, freeze, fawn, I think are the 2 new ones. So it is trying, again, it's trying to keep you safe. Do you need to run? Let's help you get out of here so you can run. Now, unfortunately, when the amygdala is hijacked, it literally cuts off all communication with the prefrontal cortex. So in a situation where if you did have to run away from a tiger, that's helpful because I don't need to be assessing, what is the tiger thinking? What is this going on? I need to get out of there. I need to be safe. So it's going to help enable that. Most of us, I would say most of us here, at least, probably don't have to deal with that type of physical danger, but the brain is still dealing with these other types of dangers, perceived dangers throughout the day. And so with this one, it's when we can really be well rested, when we can really acknowledge the things that are going on, like with something emotional where it's like, hey, I'm getting feedback. Yes, I don't like this, or maybe I don't agree with this. I can still be present. I don't have to do anything about it right now. And I say that and it sounds so simple, but I will also say that when you don't have enough sleep, when your brain hasn't had the chance to make meaning out of certain things, or the biological part where it needs to kind of wash between the cells, you will be unable to really engage. And then it just kind of looks like you're a person who just argues with feedback or fights feedback, when that's absolutely not the case. So the sleep deprivation, so our connection between logic and emotion is just completely severed. So when you've had a good amount of sleep, and that can look different for every person, and it depends on age, it depends on lifestyle, it depends on a lot of different things. But then in that feedback situation, I can say, okay, I'm getting feedback. I understand that I'm not in any physical danger. And again, you're not necessarily thinking every single one of these thoughts, but your brain's here to help you out. So you're well rested. I understand I'm getting feedback. I may or may not like it. Let me listen to this feedback, but I can still show up really well. Versus if I am in a sleep deprived state, oh, you got feedback for me? I've got feedback for you, right? So it can start to get very combative. We can feel overwhelmed by it. And then it can really start to make us then be like, oh, you're going to accuse me of doing this. Well, now I'm going to do it, right? You don't think I show up on time? Well, now I'm never going to be on time. Now, again, we may not think every one of those thoughts, but in a sleep deprived state, like the example I gave earlier with the soil from the garden bed to the ground, that was a completely volatile reaction to something that was nothing, really, in the context of things. So when we aren't getting the sleep that we need, we're not really able to show up in a meaningful way, the way that we want to show up and the way that other people really deserve to have us show up so that they can also experience our talents and our skills and our abilities. So we have that deep sleep that's, of course, helping us to consolidate memory. Then we have this REM sleep, and REM is rapid eye movement. And this is your overnight therapist. And so throughout the day, right, you have this experience and it was really emotionally charged for whatever reason. Maybe it was really exciting and happy, or it was really upsetting. But now in REM sleep, your brain is able to say, let's look at this again. And this time, there are going to be no stress hormones. There's going to be no happiness hormone. There's not going to be a bunch of hormones that are going to sway us one way or the other. It's going to take a completely neutral look at our experiences from the day. And when it has that low stress hormone space, it can actually say, okay, feedback is not dangerous. Boom. Like I can now look at this in a different way moving forward. This thing was dangerous or did make me uncomfortable, did make me feel unsafe. I'm going to remember that so that in the future, I can kind of give myself an alarm a little bit quicker and I can get out of that situation more easily. The most important thing about REM sleep, though, is that your brain is so active during this part of sleep. And it's because it's essentially reliving your day and doing that meaning making that is so critical for us as humans and for just our brain and our ability to evolve within the world, within our lives, to meet our goals, to do all of that kind of stuff. So at the end, we no longer have this emotional story, we have this integrated narrative. I know I've had many experiences where I'm really upset about something or something is really annoying to me. And then I go to sleep and the next day I'm like, okay, I mean, that's fine. It's not that big of a deal. And you're like, oh, you just need to sleep on it, right? I'm sure we've all heard that. You're like, you just need to sleep on it. Yes, because your brain is going to really help you and be that REM sleep is going to be that overnight therapist that helps metabolize our experiences. A critical thing to know about REM sleep, though, is that it is actually, we can get into deep sleep pretty easily. So if there are these like different levels, even though deep sleep sounds like it's going to be the deepest part of sleep, it's the first part of sleep, and REM is the next stage. So sometimes we don't always get into REM sleep or we're there for a really short amount of time, especially if we have disrupted or disordered sleep or we're not really great at sleeping, which again, it happens to everyone. There are seasons, there are just different experiences that can cause us to sleep differently. Okay, this is the super nerdy part that I promise I won't spend too much time on, but it's the biological part. And really, the most important thing you need to know here is that your lymphatic system, when we are sleeping, are the cells in our brain, they essentially are rested in a place where they can now kind of spread out a little bit. So throughout the day, there's all these things that are happening and it causes these pathways to get clogged. So now we're in a rested state and our pathways are open just a little bit, enough that the cerebrospinal fluid is able to wash through there and like get all of that stuff out of there. The reason why this is important is that it does help with our sleep, right? So it does help us to be able to get to that REM sleep a lot easier, but it also can help with preventing or mitigating, I should say, neurodegenerative diseases. So things like dementia or Alzheimer's, it can help to mitigate those in the future. So again, if our brain is just continuing to stack up with things that are negative, or I'm sorry, not that are negative, that are happening throughout the day, positive or negative, your brain needs a break, right? Your brain just needs a break. Okay. So now, with sacrificing sleep or thinking like, hey, I need to do this, I need to do this, I need to do that, that can really, and so we say, hey, we're going to do this and then I'll get to sleep, right? And then I'll do these other pieces. We are actually sacrificing the thing that we need to do all that stuff. So whether we're actually trying to be high performers, whatever that looks like and means to us, a lack of sleep is going to make those things not happen, right? Because we haven't had the biological washing that our cells need to be able to be really high performers. And then we're also not integrating and removing all those emotions from things. I know like there was a time in my life when I had a different career. It was a very stressful one. I was great experience. Also had to leave, way too stressful for me. And with that, it was like my sleep was so disordered. And then it was like I never had time to recover. So it became an exercise of psychological endurance and not actually high performance or resilience of any kind. It was just this like buckle down and get through. And that was because a large part of that was because of the disordered sleep. And so when we sacrifice our sleep, we're not going to be able to pay attention to things, right? Our focus is just going to be so off. Again, going back to even, like I said earlier this week, I was in a meeting and I remember starting me, I was leading the meeting too. And I was just at the beginning, I said, it was my team, but I said, hey, just so you know, I'm a little bit off today. It has nothing to do with you all. It has to do with me. I just need to, get my sleep figured out tonight. Still going to have the meeting. Here are our objectives. But just to let you know, if I seem off, that's why. And I also wanted them to know some of them, other people are very sensitive also to us, especially if we're leaders. So if we're not sleeping well and then we're not paying attention or we're not offering different kind of options or solutions or coaching, then what will happen is we will show up in a way that other people are like, are they upset with me? Do they not care about my work? Am I about to get fired? And now we have caused an amygdala hijack in someone else that we totally did not intend to have happen. So sometimes even just voicing it can be really helpful. But so when we're not sleeping, that our creativity, our ability to problem solve, our ability to brainstorm, to find other solutions and be flexible and adaptable, it is gone. And in the world we live in, which there can be a lot of chaos, there can be a lot of confusion, whether that's at work or in politics or in families, like that just, it is a constant, right? Like things are so inconsistent, not by anybody's fault, but just because that's being an adult in the world. If we don't have the ability to really stay flexible and adaptable, or we're emotionally volatile, is going to make things a lot harder for ourselves than it absolutely needs to be. Okay, so with that, our ability to show up, to do our jobs well, to not just feel like we have to buckle down and psychologically endure, to be able to be strategic in our work, to build if we're entrepreneurs, to support if we're, in HR, to create if we're engineers, right? Like whatever it is, and those can also be intermixed. All of those things are dependent upon that cognitive integration, that psychological regulation, and that biological maintenance that is happening at night. So a lot of times when we think of, oh, these people are so resilient, people who are the most resilient have been found to really understand how their brain works. They also get the best sleep possible for their lifestyle and for their needs. And then they also really understand their triggers so that then when these different things come up, they can say, oh, okay, that's actually not as serious or as intense, or I know what my brain is doing right now. Great, I can still be engaged and active in this. I can still move through the world really well. And it's because their brain has had the opportunity to do these things so that during the day, now I can have all these other experiences and there's plenty of space to integrate that. Like I said, our brain loves to keep us safe. And I love that about our brains, right? It has kept me safe up till this point, and I'm very appreciative. The best things we can do for our brain, especially around sleep, are make our routines as predictable and biologically aligned as possible. And so what that means is that if we go to sleep at about the same time every night, and we wake up at about the same time every morning, our brain in advance will start thinking like I'm an early to bed person. So I am in bed by like 9:30. And so but I will start my bedtime routine around 8:30, right? And so then I'm really setting up my brain to be like, okay, we're going to go to sleep here, and then I get up at 5:30. And so it's like I try to be as consistent even on weekends, even on days when I don't have other things going on. And that over time, especially from the time when I said I had really terrible disordered sleep and it was really just a psychological endurance exercise, that was how I personally had fixed my own sleep, which was where it was like, be as consistent as possible. And I say as possible because there's life, right? Sometimes there's kids, there's family, there are other things. And if those things come up occasionally, that happens, right? But being as consistent as you can for yourself and creating that habit. And like I said, about the same time. I know, like, I also have like an Aura ring, and it will tell me, it also tells me, it's like, hey, you need to start thinking about going to bed or getting ready for bed. And then it kind of shows me this window of time. And it's like about a 2.5 hour window. So our brain, again, it just kind of needs some sort of predictability as to when we're going to fall into these rhythms. And then, as much as is reasonable, we want to try to stay in the sorry, I saw your question pop up. Yes. Okay. That's a great question. Does daylight savings time change affect our sleep quality? Yes. And it is because of even though we all know it's coming, it's the abruptness of it that can feel so just, it could just really mess it up. And so, with that, like I said, even though we know it's coming, it then doesn't occur to us to be like, well, let me start all these things an hour behind. And then going to the circadian rhythm piece, because there's more or less daylight, it is going to affect that biological alignment. And so I would say, like, for those kind of parts of the year, it's important to remember that, like, hey, I'm going to need to adjust a little bit in these places. That's a great question. Okay. And so exactly to that, the 24-hour circadian, this is like little dashboard here, it helps to map these optimal behaviors for your own biological clock, which is unique to you. So we may all kind of consistently be like, yes, of course, when it starts to get darker, the melatonin hormone is going to activate when it's like, oh, it's dark, you should get to sleep. But it's kind of in understanding what works for us, how much caffeine you can have, and how late in the day you can have it, your wind down routines, even your wake up routine. They say that spending 10 minutes outside in the morning, just like, with the sun there, maybe you're drinking your coffee, doing whatever, or tea, that can really help to also like get your brain back into a circadian rhythm of it's time to be awake. It's time to be up right now. Yes, absolutely. I see also in the chat, if you have many months of being sleep deprived, it can cause health issues. Our sleep is linked to so many other things, whether that's our physical health, our mental health. It is really, it's so linked. And I think, again, when I say that, it's like we all kind of know that, but then it's like, oh, like let's like look under the hood and see that this is what's happening in our brain. This is what our brain needs. And when these things start to break down, the rest of the body is just going to follow. So if we can do our best to find our 24-hour circadian dashboard and kind of figure out those pieces for ourselves, that will also really help us to get into a really great sleep cycle. And so, like I said, sleep is not time loss. It is this really great opportunity to invest in the architecture of our mind, in all these different ways that we want to show up for our families, for our friends at work, in all these different, and for our communities. Like there's all these different ways that we want to show up. And one of the like best self-care, one of the kindest things we can do to ourselves is figure out our sleep rhythms, create our own rituals around them, and they don't have to be big or long or crazy. They just have to work for you. And remembering that this is a biological maintenance activity. It's not this whole like, I know I was very guilty at one point in my life of being like, I'll sleep when I'm dead. I'm not worried about that. I'll sleep faster. Ah ha ha, all jokes. But at the same time, it's like, oh no, this is actually what enables me to be super productive, to really show up well. So that's all I have for you on the sleep front. This recording will be available as well as the deck. I'll send it out to all those who are enrolled here. It'll go through the Eventbrite newsletter. And then you can also find it on my YouTube page. I have a podcast called Life Alchemized where I talk about all of this kind of stuff. There's a new episode every Monday. If you go to my website, Natasha Cheyenne, you can also find my blog and a lot of other free resources there. And then I have a really exciting event coming up. Free registration opens. It'll open in about 2 weeks for April 24th. The Inner Compass Summit is where there are going to be 5 different speakers who are all leading workshops that are very interactive. It's not recorded, so people can be very interactive on a variety of different topics. So we have people who are going to be talking about leading incredible meetings and finding archetypes through tarot cards. And there's just all kinds of different things there. I will be leading a workshop on emotional regulation. And so that will be available on Eventbrite coming in the next week or two. So I'm going to stop the recording here. And if anyone has any questions, I am open to any.